Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I made this motion to refer the issue of EpiPens to this committee, really as a way to start a discussion about the possibility of our first responders being equipped with EpiPens in either the ambulances or the fire or police. And I just wanted to have a conversation, see where we could see what the starting point was and what is involved in moving in that direction, whether it's something that our first responders are interested in doing, or if maybe some of them are doing it already, but just kind of getting the ball rolling. So I appreciate both the fire chief and police chief being here, and Sharon Cameron as well. We also have Atlantic Ambulance here. We also have Christy DiLoretto here, and Christy is the person I had the conversation with, who really was the one who asked that we start a conversation. So if there's no objection, maybe she could kind of give us a little bit of insight on what the need is.
Sure. Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Ms. DiLoretto, would you be so kind to come up to the podium here and give us a snapshot of where we're at as a city in regards specifically to EpiPens?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to everybody.
If you could please identify yourself for the record, name and address, please.
My name is Christy DiLoretto. My address is 12 Esquire Drive. And I am the president and founder of the Allergy and Asthma Awareness Initiative, which originated out of Peabody. So we have made a lot of progress over the last 3 years that we've become a nonprofit, and really all the work that we're doing. And one of the things that we're proudest of is going before the school committee and city council and the mayor and putting EpiPen cabinets into all of the public schools in Peabody, which has actually taken a lot of, it's moved forward over the past couple of months, and we've got the EpiPens in there now, and there's the system in place. And that kind of led to the next step was, really where we just feel so strongly that knowing that epinephrine is the only line of defense against a reaction with anaphylaxis, that when you call in an emergency and you have your first responders come to the home or the school, the first to get there is usually the police or even the fire before the ambulance even gets there. And with an allergic reaction, seconds matter, every single second. So if we can have, that first line of defense that arrives to a scene carrying that epinephrine, that could be a way to save more lives. And there's an advocate who has also become a friend of mine who lost her son at 15 years old to an allergic reaction in New York, and she just recently did this in her town. And she had the police and fire who are now carrying that alongside the Narcan. And that's another thing, we just feel like there are 15 million Americans with allergies, with food allergies, or with allergies that could be, potentially death could be caused because of anaphylaxis, that we feel like we need to start taking more precaution here and just having, where seconds matter. An allergic reaction, you could experience death in 1 second. It could be, 1, 2, or 3 minutes, but you just don't know. So, just taking that extra step and having this line of defense would just be, it would mean so much to the families just to know that that's happening. I think it would also help in schools, where a teacher identifies a child having an allergic reaction, they're going to call 911 immediately. I'm pretty sure that the police are probably going to arrive. Maybe even a school resource officer is already there. If they were able to carry that epinephrine, it would just make a lot of sense, and it would, just be better all around for the situation.
Can you tell us, is every school, does every school have one right now? Yeah, I know that was your initiative.
An Epi cabinet?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so. I know that all the elementary do. I'm not sure. I don't know if the cabinets have been hung at the Higgins as of yet, or the high school.
Questions for Ms. DiLoretto prior to us going to the police, fire, and health department? Councilor Massouras, please.
Yeah, I'm going to have to excuse my ignorance here, and I'm going to tell you I feel a little embarrassed about not knowing this because I have an EpiPen in my glove compartment. And my wife does have allergies. Can you be a little more specific as to what type of allergies? Or I'm not, I know you could say allergies, but I really don't know what you're talking about. Can you be a little more specific as to why you would need an EpiPen?
Sure. So an allergic reaction can be caused by a number of things. It could be, mostly it's attributed to food related. So for instance, I have my sons are here, and one of my sons is really the motivating factor behind everything that I do. He's allergic to every single type of nut, to sesame, to sunflower, and he recently grew out of coconut. So, you know, for him it's food, but it's not only food. He's also got mold, he's got dust, he's got a lot of different things. Not everything is going to cause anaphylaxis, but for the most part it's food. It's also insect stings. So you could have a child on the playground that gets stung by a bee, and that could turn into an anaphylaxis situation, and that child could, I mean, potentially it could be severely enough to cause death. So, you know, it's mostly attributed to those few things, but any type of food. I mean, there are multiple food allergies that you could have. It could be nuts, peanuts, sesame, sunflower, coconut, all the regular kinds. It could be shellfish, seafood. It just all depends. And honestly, what we're talking about here, even with the Epi cabinets, most of the kids, and many of the kids that have a known food allergy or some type of an allergy most likely have some type of a plan in the nurse's office, and they have an EpiPen. They're going to probably have their name in the EpiPen box. We're talking about the kid that eats the snack at for the birthday party in the classroom, and they have you know, the allergic reaction, or somebody at home, you know, the child is, or an adult is experiencing this for the first time. They get stung by a bee for the first time out in their yard, and they have, you know, they experience it then. You just don't know. You may be lucky enough to not have any allergies at this point in your life, but that doesn't mean tomorrow you won't. So it's the fear of the unknown there and just being ready.
In order for an EpiPen to be in my car, obviously it was there for a purpose, and my daughter has asthma. Would that have
Yes.
any? Oh, that would. Okay, maybe
Yeah,
that's
so
why.
epinephrine can also be used for asthma attacks, but
okay.
please take your EpiPen out of the car because it shouldn't be in the different temperatures.
Okay.
You might want to check that because it
right.
could have gotten too cold or hot.
Okay. Well, you just educated me a
Yeah.
little bit. Thank you.
You made me nervous when you said it.
Councilor Sharris, please.
Thank you. Chrissy, I know you're the authority in this city on this subject. I know all the work you've done with the schools with it. Obviously, it was on the committee then, and I applaud your approach to it. And this is basically, it's taken it a step further. It's not just the schools, because we believe the schools are now being covered that way. It's the general public that you're worried about.
Yeah.
And I can understand that, I can appreciate that, and thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you, and Councilor Charis, you've been great on all of this, especially through the school committee. And yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I always spend a lot of time talking about the schools, but yeah, we're taking that one step further. You know, you've got public spaces, you know, people are here for a meeting, they're over at Sky Zone for a party, they're in the mall, they're in a food court. There are so many different places that I'm hoping that we can get these cabinets into, but there's also a lot, it has to start from the top. We need to start with legislation, which Councilor Walsh has been great with, and, you know, just getting these bills in place so that people aren't scared to do this and they're actually enabled to do it. And I just feel like if we can start also at the police and the fire who are responding to these incidences and having them equipped to deal with it, you know, that's even better. In a lot of places, you also have ambulances that may or may not, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know this was in the past, but not all ambulances at one time had epinephrine on. You would need to say that it was an allergic reaction. And also bus drivers, you know, bus drivers don't carry epinephrine. So you've got these kids on school buses, I'm sure the MBTA as well, and you know, what happens if somebody has a reaction there? So, you know, it's widespread, and most people, adults are the worst, don't carry their EpiPens. They don't feel like they need them or they're going to be able to react fast enough, and that's not always the case.
Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you to Representative Walsh and to you, Christie. I think bringing this to the forefront has been excellent, and the breathe events are phenomenal. So I thank you for those. But I just wanted to share a quick story. My youngest daughter and I recently left a basketball tournament, and she asked me if she could take a friend to Red Robin, which was down the street. And when we got to Red Robin, the friend decided to let me know that they were allergic to all nuts, in that they had forgotten their EpiPen in their basketball bag. And it was the most uncomfortable feeling as a parent to have for that entire dinner, because you know, to having somebody else's child in your care, and throughout the entire dinner, I was trying to plan out, okay, what do I do if something happens? So to know that our first responders would have these would be excellent. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the meat of it. I want to hear from Ms. Cameron, Chief Pazin, Chief Griffin, Glenn from Atlantic. Ladies before gentlemen, Sharon. Please.
Thank you. So as Ms. DiLoretto said, sorry, I'm Sharon Cameron. I'm the Public Health Director for the City of Peabody. Anaphylaxis is a very severe, potentially life-threatening reaction, and it can occur within seconds or minutes of exposure to an allergen. And the most common allergens, as you've heard, can be food, can be insect stings, can also be medications. And basically what anaphylaxis is, it's a causes the immune system to release a flood of chemicals that basically causes a person to go into shock, and their blood pressure can drop suddenly, and it can restrict their airway and make it impossible for them to breathe, and that's how the fatal reactions can happen. Any episode of anaphylaxis, even when it's treated with an EpiPen, does require a follow-up visit to the emergency room, so that's a really important piece of the training that we would want to do for first responders. Just a little bit of the national data. In the U.S., about 4% of adults have food allergies, and about 8% of children have food allergies. And according to the CDC, the food allergies among children have increased about 50% between 1997 and 2011. About half of the fatal food allergy reactions have been triggered by consuming food outside of the home, so as Christy has said, out in public settings. And individuals who have food allergies and also who have asthma are at an increased risk for a severe or fatal reaction. So rapid access to epinephrine is known to save lives. A study by the World Allergy Organization reviewed a small number of cases, 6 fatal and 7 non-fatal cases of food-induced anaphylaxis in children, and then they found that all of the people who survived those anaphylactic reactions had received epinephrine within 5 minutes of having the reaction. So just to give you a little bit of Peabody information, fortunately, it's very rare to need to administer an EpiPen, and it's a wonderful thing, and I know you'll hear from the ambulance service about their numbers, so I won't go into those, but we only have data about what's happening in the school system, and in our public schools right now, we have 147 students throughout the district for which we know they have an EpiPen. They've given us a prescription, they've provided an EpiPen to the school nurse's office, but we also know that that underrepresents the number of children with actual allergies, because especially as children become older, they carry their own EpiPens on them. They don't always make the school nurses aware that they have the allergy, even though we certainly would want to have that information. In the public schools, fortunately, in 2017 and 2016, we had 0 instances where we needed to administer an EpiPen. We had 2 instances in 2015 and 1 in 2014. As Ms. DiLoretto said, students with an EpiPen are asked to provide an EpiPen to the nurse's office, but we also have stock epinephrine in the nurse's office, which is for students or anybody really in the building who may not have a diagnosis, who's experiencing that first-time reaction. The nurses have that stock. And we also have the cabinets, which have been put up this year, which have been put up in other places in the school to allow access in, for instance, places like cafeteria, places where kids might be experiencing a reaction away from the nurse's office, to really try to minimize that reaction time. In addition, in the schools, we've trained other school staff on how to administer an EpiPen. So they're trained to recognize signs and symptoms of anaphylaxis. They're trained to know how to use an EpiPen, including the need to follow up with a 911 call. And they must demonstrate proficiency to the school nurse in how to use the EpiPen by using a training tool. These trained individuals can only use an EpiPen on people who already have a diagnosis. So this training, the online training and the proficiency demonstration, can take place in about an hour. So the training requirements are not very burdensome, but the training is really important because there are some medical conditions for which EpiPen administration can pose a risk. You need to provide special consideration for individuals who have heart disease, pregnant or nursing mothers, elderly patients, and people who have certain medications. The most common adverse reactions would include things like tremor, weakness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, or headache. It's not common, but there have been some fatal adverse reactions that would include ventricular fibrillation or cerebral hemorrhages. But it is important to note that despite these potential side effects, the presence of those conditions is not considered a contraindication to administering an epinephrine during an acute life-threatening situation. So it's very important that the people who are being trained to provide epinephrine are trained in these signs and symptoms of an acute reaction. So the Board of Health does support making epinephrine more widely available, and the recommendation would be we do have a city physician, and as this conversation progresses and we start to work out more details about how this could be administered, we would recommend to contact the city physician for her opinion on the program.
Thank you, Ms. Cameron. Councilor Walsh, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question through you to Sharon. Sharon, what is the cost of the EpiPens?
So the brand name EpiPen, which is the most common thing we have, comes in a 2-pack, and the 2-pack ranges anywhere between generally in the neighborhood of $400 to $600 for a 2-pack. The EpiPen and the generics are less expensive, but they're still a few $100s. The company that manufactures EpiPens does have an EpiPen for Schools program. They provide each school with one twin pack of a junior dose and a regular sized dose every year. So the school supply is not something that we have to pay for, but I'm not aware that they have a similar program for first responders.
Thank you. The concern I have is that, the school piece of it is excellent, but my understanding is that the boxes, the Epi boxes, are only for those children or those students who have a prescription, and they're the ones who would have access to it. So if there is another child in the school, and really we need to talk about when school gets out and we're everywhere else, but just for the schools for a second. So if there was a child in school who didn't know he or she had a food allergy and ended up in anaphylactic shock,
Yep.
what happens to that person? They can't access that. They would have to wait for first responders, correct?
Well, if it happens during the school day, the school nurses have stock epinephrine that's not designated for a particular child, so it can be used on anybody who has a reaction. Unfortunately, right now, we talked about the EpiPen cabinets and things like that. The restriction, those things, when they're used by other school staff who've been trained, because of the way the state regulations are at this point in time, other school staff who are not medical professionals cannot use those on anybody who doesn't have a prior diagnosis. But the nurses have the ability to assess any patient and use the stock epinephrine on somebody who's experiencing first-time reaction.
Thank you.
Why don't we, Councilor Manning Martin?
Just a quick question. I know that the state offered a program for Narcan to be bought in bulk. Is there any effort in that regard with EpiPens?
I'm not aware of it because, as I said, we don't pay for the stock for the school, and beyond the school stock, we're not really purchasing epinephrine at this point in time, so I don't know if the ambulance service might have
A first responder may be able to
Glenn,
shed
do you
some
know?
light, or maybe not. I don't want to put anyone on the
Actually,
spot.
we're gonna call you up. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chief or chief? I don't care which chief. And please identify yourself. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, all. Stephen Pasden, Fire Chief, City of Peabody. I reside at 15 Cherry Street in Danvers, Massachusetts. And good evening, and I commend Ms. DiLoretto for her efforts, and I thank her for coming here. I can tell you from experience being a career-long EMT, the benefits of life-saving of an EpiPen are magnificent when it happens. In my career, I've actually not seen it. I've not had the opportunity to administer it, and I did work 7 years as a basic EMT, but at that point in time, we didn't carry, as a basic EMT, we didn't carry EpiPens. I don't want to talk what years those were, but I have had a couple, and I have a family member that's carried an EpiPen. So I understand the complexities, and I understand how magnificent that it works. Currently, one of the things that we did do when we negotiated with the union for Narcan, we also negotiated their ability to administer EpiPen. We saw that, as well as glucometers for for sugar, test sugars. The concern that I have, and believe me, I would love to carry EpiPens, is the cost. To give you a rough idea, for the fire department to carry just 10 doses of the double packs, because we have to carry junior and adult, so we have to have enough for both, because they're different milligrams of dosages. And this is the generic epinephrine that Ms. Cameron was talking about, would be $7,000. Out of that $7,000, it has a shelf life of 1 year every year that it has to be replaced. Unfortunately, in the fire department budget for such items, we're budgeted for $40,000 for things that would cover, that EpiPens would come over. That $7,000 is 28% of my line item budget. So that's a very difficult, again, I would love to have it, and don't get me wrong, but I have to balance my budget, and there are priorities and things that I have to buy. The Narcan, for example, we were fortunate enough to negotiate to have Atlantic step up, and for them they supply our yearly Narcan, so it doesn't cost the city anything. Now, like Councilor Manning said, I don't know of anything in the state that you can buy bulk or you can buy cheaper for Epi. I don't know. I did research. I couldn't find it.
Chief,
Narcan,
can I just ask if no, $7,000 is for how many doses?
Is for 10 packs, 10 of the double packs of the adult, and then 10 of the junior. The cost would be $7,000 to put on 10 of my. That would even cover all of my. It would cover all of my apparatus, front line, a couple of my, like the deputy chief's vehicle, but even that wouldn't cover all of my other vehicles that are currently on the road. That would just be.
That was my question.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That would be what a minimum that I need to have with a dose or two extra for a resupply, because you're not going to get that. We wouldn't have a big resupply to go back and get it. We couldn't get it at the hospital, and we can't swap it out with the ambulance. That's as far as I know at this point. The other thing that we would have to do, and again we can do this. We did it with the Narcan. We would have to. Unfortunately, we've already negotiated that, and I think the chief can speak to his situation, is we'd also have to get an MOA with a physician. Our current physician is Dr. Gendro at Leahy, and he would have to be the medical director to oversee our administration of an EpiPen. And it's not anything, that's no obstacle, but that's just one more piece of this puzzle that would have to take place for our first responders to carry EpiPens. But again, I'm totally for it, again, but I have to balance a budget, and I have to look at, for example, what I weigh, and again, I'm no way am I being negative, but at the same time, when I look at that amount of money would, each year would, and again, I have to dispose of it if I don't use it, could also purchase me 2 additional defibs that I could then put in other vehicles, those same vehicles that I don't have them in now because of the cost at $3,000, and those have a much longer lifetime. And those are, if you do an analysis of how many cardiac arrests do we have in comparison to how many EpiPens we have, that's a struggle for me. And again, I'm not negative to EpiPens, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm juggling a budget, and I have to look at what my priorities are. So I would love to go out, if we proceed with this, and find somebody, a sustainable funding source, a grant, or something like what Atlantic did or Leahy. That is what I would like to do, and not take it out of my current budget, because it would just be a struggle for me to see that kind of money go out. I think Atlantic I'll let Atlantic speak to the number of dosages that they've had. It's been low. I mean, I think it's been very low if you look at what they've had in the last 3 years, and I'll let him speak to that. And again, we do have 4 ambulances in the city. during the day, and we have 3 at night, and they all carry the EpiPens. And again, I'm for it, because like everybody said, minutes count when it comes to anaphylactic shock. You know, I understand it, what it does. I have family members, so again, it's not that I'm against it. I just need the cost for me is a struggle.
Chief, I appreciate your honesty.
Yeah,
Thank you. Why don't we, Chief Griffin, and then we'll go to Glenn from Atlantic, please.
Chief Tom Griffin from the Police Department. I would echo a lot of what Fire Chief Pasden said. I'm in a little bit of a different situation. We focus solely on the Narcan when we negotiated the medical stuff. So I'd have to sit down with the 2 unions that we have at the Police Department, but I imagine that's something that could be accomplished. The other issue is the cost that we'd be concerned about. For us, on a given day during the week, we could have as many as 12 to 15 cars on the road. So there'd be a little bit more expense on my side versus what the fire chief quoted. But personally, I'm in support of it. Again, I'm sure like most everybody here, they know somebody or are related to people that are in need of this. And I think anything we can do to enhance our ability to help save lives out there in the community, I would be in favor of.
Chief, are you typically crew the first person on the scene of any kind of incident?
Cruisers can be, yeah, because they're out in the areas, so they're out, I would say a lot of the time we're one of the first ones there, yes.
And with proper training, do you see that your staff could be administering?
Yes, from what I understand, it's not immensely complicated to be trained on, and I think it would be something we could accomplish.
Councilor Sharris, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for being here. A couple months ago, I saw a program on the evening news about the abundance of EpiPens that's expired, and it's building up. But I believe the community of Newton is doing something about it, collecting them and able to reuse or recycle these. Do you have any? I only saw it quickly, and I'm not quite sure what it was, but they had talked about tens of thousands of these EpiPens that every year expire, and they are now collecting them. I believe it's Newton that's collecting them and doing something with it.
We could check. I could check into that if you want. Yeah, I haven't heard of that though.
Okay, I knew something's going on. I'm just not quite sure. I believe it's Newton, and I know it's the EpiPens. Thank you.
Councilor Walsh, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a very quick question. Chief, you talked about having to, I guess, do a side agreement as far as collective bargaining goes. What would be involved in doing that?
Probably a number of conversations with the union, expressing to them my feeling about how important this issue is, and taking their temperature and seeing where they stand on the issue.
All right. Well, thank you.
Oops. Thank you, Councilor Walsh. Any further questions for Chief Griffin? If not, I'd like to invite Glenn up from Atlantic Care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Atlantic Ambulance, excuse me. Glenn, if you could full name and address, please, for the record. Thank you.
Sure. Glenn Timmons. I'm a paramedic over at Atlantic. I live in Malden at 70 Pine Street. I've been a paramedic for 10 years, been in EMS 20 years. Our cost for the EpiPens as an ambulance company is $700. That's what we pay as a company. So it's not cheap, but as everybody said, it's well worth the money.
$700 a double dose?
Correct, for each ambulance. So all of our ambulances carry a double dose. They carry junior and adult. So far in 2017, we've administered Epi twice. In 2016, we had 4 occurrences, and back in 2015, we had 6 occurrences of administering Epi. And that's about it.
And typically, where do you come in in the sequence of arrival at, is it?
Usually we come in third. It's usually police, fire, and then we'll arrive third on scene. Usually between 5 to 6 minutes after the call.
And in the urgency of getting the EpiPen to a victim, 5-6 minutes is?
Absolutely. I mean, a minute or two, 30 seconds. Police are usually on scene very quick. that 30 seconds, that 4 or 5 minutes makes a huge difference
Okay.
a lot of times.
Okay. Any questions of Glenn, please? Councilor Walsh, no? So, thank you very much. Councilor Manning, you okay? So what do we want to do, Councilor Walsh?
Well, what I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but I am pleased with the reaction among those who spoke tonight, that they recognize that this would be a good thing for the city. What I would like to do maybe is establish a working group so that we can work out all the little kinks, for lack of a better term, and see if we can come up with a plan where we make sure that, you know, I'm comforted by the fact that all 4 ambulances are equipped now with epinephrine, but I think there are times when police and fire are there much quicker than an ambulance is, and, you know, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but in an instance when an attack occurs, it could mean all the difference between life and death. So I think that if you're willing, maybe we could set up a working group with the people who are here tonight, sit down and talk about all the different things that would be involved in implementing some type of program and seeing if we can move forward and figuring out how we can pay for it.
Bless you. I think that's a great start. Is everyone willing to serve on a small work group? Glenn? I think it's a great move. If there are no further comments or questions of anyone, yes?
Demo, make sure you check the expiration date on your EpiPen. Something tells me it might be expired.
I'd like to personally thank the DiLoretto family. Michael and Ricky, thanks for supporting your mother. It's nice of you guys to come. Christy, thanks for everything you do in this regard. I know you've brought us out of the woods and into the limelight as to what allergy awareness is, and you never stop. You're at it all the time, so keep up the good work. And Councilor Walsh, thanks for bringing it forward to us.
Mr. Chairman, do we need that in the form of a motion to set up
Yes, please.
a working group? So I would move, Mr. Chairman, that we set up a working group to consider implementation of an EpiPen program for all first responders, and that the working group include those present this evening, both Chief Pasden, Chief Griffin, Sharon Cameron, any member of the council who would like to be involved. I guess our city physician may be called in, and also maybe we would invite Christy DiLoretto to be part of that as a public, as a parent who knows firsthand. So,
Would you chair that, Mr. Walsh? Councilor
Sure,
Walsh?
thank you. So
Ms.
moved.
DiLoretto, are you willing to sit on that small work group? Okay.
Thank you,
You
Mr.
heard the
Chairman.
motion by Councilor Walsh. All in favor? Any opposed? That's a vote. Take a motion to adjourn, please. Thank you. Motion adjourned.